Norman wondered if he should be worried that there was this thing that he didn't know about in his drink. Then he took a sip and forgot all about it. Norman liked Diet Coke. Hello friends and welcome back to ReddX, your source for the freshest daily cringe content anywhere on the internet. Promise swearsies, it's just a fact and it's totally science. Go ahead and look it up. Today we've got some cringe of a more understated variety. This is r/LifeofNorman, a collaborative fiction work about the most unextraordinary, ordinary individual that the world has ever seen. And God, I love him for it. So let's not delay any longer, we'll go ahead and get right on into things. Norman gets upset during the election. Oh, that's pretty timely. Norman was hoping to catch some CSI reruns, but it appears that they had other programming scheduled. Stupid adult shows. What is this supposed to be? Future of the Nation? Don't care. Norman's a Chad. Norman reads a book. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Norman was relaxing on the couch, reading a novel. The book was an exciting narrative about a man who went on adventures across the world. Norman wondered what it would be like if someone wrote stories about him. Norman thought about how his days usually went. Well, that's just silly. What would they even write about? Norman put down his book. Suddenly, he didn't feel like reading anymore. Little does Norman know, but I hope he never finds the subreddit or the videos because he'd probably be exceedingly uncomfortable with all that. Norman enjoys a chocolate bar. It was 4 p.m. and Norman was shopping at a 7-Eleven. He saw there was a 2 for $3 sale on some chocolate bars near the cash register. He bought a Kit Kat and a Hershey bar. He got into his second-hand 2014 silver Toyota and ate the Kit Kat, one piece at a time. It was very crispy and sweet. He had enough chocolate for one sitting and put the Hershey into his pocket. Unfortunately, when he got home later that night, it melted. Well, you don't have much experience with chocolate there, do you, Norman? Here's a tip, stick it in the freezer, eat it later. I just saved you $1.50. Norman takes 10. Norman had just finished writing a hefty email, and as a treat to himself, he decided to lean back in his chair. He would have folded his arms behind his head, but he'd seen other guys do that in the office, and it looked a little self-indulgent. He admired his pristine desktop and wondered whether it could do with a spruce or a small fern. It was a little bare. Even the photo of Norman was a little bit old. It had been taken when Norman was a kitten, looking startled, his pupils as large as ink-filled satellite dishes. Life moves pretty fast, remembered Norman from the Ferris Bueller film that he had accidentally watched last night. If you don't look around sometime, you could miss it, he attempted. He would take an up-to-date photo of Norman that very evening. It seems like Norman learned a lot from Ferris Bueller. I think we all have. Norman feels blue. Norman was having a bad day. This morning, Norman, his cat, vomited on the couch. Normally this wouldn't bother him. He never found it as a chore to look after his best friend, but today, she vomited on top of the daily newspaper as well, leaving his morning empty and without a crossword. Just my luck, Norman muttered to himself. Later at work, things got even worse. Not only was it Monday, but Frank, Norman's coworker, beat him to the last creamer cup. Norman could have grabbed it first, but he let Frank step in front of him, just in case Norman grabbed something that Frank needed, like the creamer. Of course, Norman was happy for Frank to have the cream, but that left Norman's coffee bitter, which left Norman bitter. In the evening, huffed and puffed and all tuckered out, Norman went to his favorite restaurant, TGI Fridays. Why is that so in character? He placed an order for chicken wings. They were satisfactory for him, but not enough to sweeten his mood. "Hey, mister," said the red-haired waitress. "Just thought I'd ask you. We got an apple pie slice that someone didn't want with their order. Would you like to have it? It's on the house." Norman looked up at the waitress. She smiled warmly. The pie looked warm, too. Norman nodded. "Here you go, sweetie," she said. From the window outlooking from the kitchen, the red-haired waitress and one of her co-workers watched Norman inspect the pie. He spun the plate around, carefully analyzing the slice. He grabbed the fork, cut off a piece, and took a bite. A warm smile came onto his face. "He looks happy now," said the co-worker. "If he's happy, I'm happy." I didn't even know that they allowed you to go to TGI Fridays on a Monday. But I'm glad that Norman did, and I'm glad these two noticed that he needed a little pick-me-up. Free pie works wonders. Norman does drugs. Oh, edgy. Norman was at the convenience store. He was particularly parched that morning and looked at his options. He reached for a caffeine-free Coke, Norman's favorite, but he paused. I have a long day ahead of me, thought Norman. I could use a pick-me-up. Norman grabbed a regular Coke instead. Oh yeah, buddy, kick the tires and light the fires, you know? Gotta be careful with that stuff. Eventually Norman's gonna get into the 5-hour energies. We'll never be able to stop him. Norman games the system. A few days ago, Norman went to his fridge to pour a glass of milk. The carton was light. He thought, the milk is almost gone. He emptied the carton into a glass, but the glass was half empty. Gee, he thought, I really should go grocery shopping. Before disposing of the carton, he saw a coupon adhered to the side, 50 cents off. So he peeled it off. Norman wondered if anything else he needed had a coupon. It had been some time since he last grappled with any coupons. Today, for some odd reason, he felt that things would be different. With a dulled number 2 pencil in hand and the milk coupon in his pocket, Norman started a list. He opened up the weekly mailer to browse coupons on his favorite items. Cat food? Nah, no deals on cat food. Bread? No deals on bread. There was a deal on flavored potato chips. No thank you. And then he found a store coupon. Milk, 50 cents off. Norman pondered, could I possibly use both at the same time? Although the thought of it was thrilling, he decided to try it. He finished off the list and went to the store. Oh yeah, Norman, to pull off a big heist, you need to take a small hit. Norman entered the grocery store with butterflies in his stomach. Everything in his body was telling him to just forget it. Just buy the milk and don't make any waves. But Norman pressed on. Norman found the brand of milk, right where it always was. However, to his surprise, it was on sale. 50 cents off. Oh, now his butterflies turned to bees. He was whelmed with emotions of uncertainty. I couldn't possibly ask the checkout clerk to sell me milk that's on sale for 50 cents off and ask for another 50 cents off with the manufacturer's coupon and ask for them to honor the store's coupon. That just feels flat out rude. But still, Norman pushed on. He finished shopping and went to the checkout. He placed the coupons on the belt at the end of his groceries. The checkout clerk rang up the milk. The screenshot showed milk, $3, sale, 50 cents, $2.50. Then at the end, the clerk rang in the coupons. Beep. The screen showed manufacturer's coupon, 50 cents. Beep. Store coupon, 50 cents. He paid for his groceries and left. As he exited the store, he thought, what we are never changes, but who we are never stops changing. And that is a CSI quote at the end of it, which is just the perfect cherry on the sundae, isn't it? Sometimes you cut me real deep, Norman. I'm glad we're learning and growing. Norman's cat-like reflexes. Norman was walking down the street one sunny afternoon, breaking in a new pair of loafers. Just as his left heel was about to hit the ground, he spotted a wad of gum directly below it. Without a thought, he quickly repositioned his foot in midair and stepped down on his toes instead of his heel, barely avoiding contact with the gum. He allowed himself a small smile of victory as he continued his stroll. If it didn't specify the loafers, I would think that this story was actually about Norman the cat. But hey, you know, look at that. Good for him. Old Norman still got it. Norman finally snaps. Oh no. He had been trying for hours, but he finally got the hang of it. Norman wore a satisfied smile, one of an accomplished man, for the remainder of the workday. He couldn't wait to show Norman. Oh, snaps his fingers. Yeah, they got me a little bit more than it should have. It's so succinct. 3 beautiful sentences. Well played, sir. Norman makes a choice. It's always difficult. Norman walked into the convenience store and he thought about the time that his coworker Lisa told a story about picking out a kitten. I picked the all-black one because it was the cutest, she had said. But I felt bad because the other kittens are probably sad that they didn't get picked too. Norman walked to the cash register and paid for his can of caffeine-free Diet Coke. He wondered if the other cans felt sad for not getting picked too. I mean, no, they're inanimate objects, but you could buy a case or two if you want. You just gotta watch out for the aspartame. And the comments kind of went off on aspartame too. There's a tiny sub-story down here. By Back Kidza, Norman drinks a soda. Norman popped open his can and started towards the door. As he moved to push it open, his eyes glanced over the ingredients list of that soda. Carbonated water, caramel color, aspartame, phosphoric... Wait, what was that one? Norman knew what carbonated water was. He knew the color of caramel. He didn't know what aspartame was. Norman wondered if he should be worried that there was this thing that he didn't know about in his drink. Then he took a sip and forgot all about it. Norman liked Diet Coke. Yeah, sort of fly by night. This is one of those things that doesn't really seem like it matters, but it might. Couple decades down the road. I'll say a prayer for you, Norman. This one's called Norman Tells a Lie. It's impossible. It was a regular lazy Sunday for Norman. Norman was asleep for once on his lap, and Norman was half watching daytime CSI reruns, half enjoying the moment, but only half. Then the doorbell rang, and Norman scrambled off his lap and under the couch. Silly Norman, Norman chuckled to himself, but Norman also thought to himself, who could that be? Maybe his son decided to pop in for a visit. Norman quickly shuffled to the door in a frenzy of excitement, but only to see a random charity door knocker. He opened the door, trying to hide his disappointment. When the lady inquired for money, Norman responded, sorry, I've already donated earlier today with my son, online. He taught me how to use the internet today. A smile came to the lady's face, and she told Norman with a smile to enjoy the rest of his day. Norman felt guilty over himself, but he didn't know which bit of his lie he felt more guilty about. The part about his son, or the part about knowing how to use the internet. But he didn't feel bad about denying money to charity. Alright, cool. I'm seeing what you're about, Norman. But seriously, I hope your son does come for a visit soon. You deserve it. Norman abuses drugs. Oh my god, dude. This is a slippery slope. What'd I tell you about that caffeine Coke? He's gotten hooked into the cola. It ain't good for you, Norman. Let's see how it goes. Norman laid limp on his couch, rubbing his temples and clenching his eyelids. This headache had really been mildly inconveniencing him for almost 2 whole hours now, and he was really enjoying reading a tutorial on proper garden hedge clipping techniques, but even the lowest brightness setting on his Dell laptop aggravated the headache. You want to text-to-speech that stuff, maybe? Norman decided that he had had enough, and he needed to get off the couch and take action. A pack of aspirin lay on the counter in the kitchen, and Norman thought it best to read through the instructional leaflet. After all, someone had taken the time to write it. He proceeded to take 2 tablets, as recommended, followed by a slice of conservatively buttered wholemeal toast. That's good, not on an empty stomach. Half an hour passed, and Norman felt no effect from the aspirin. This slightly irked him, and in a moment of ruthless impulse, Norman knocked back a 3rd aspirin with a glass of water. An overwhelming feeling of instant regret rushed through him as a result of his horribly irresponsible actions, and Norman wondered whether he truly knew himself. Do any of us truly know ourselves? I don't want to say Norman's fallen off the deep end, but this is a slippery slope. We're seeing it happen in real time. Just be careful out there, little buddy. Norman's one night stand. Or maybe just one nightstand. Norman's nightstand was beginning to run out of space for his books about 20th century rail networks. Norman was considering buying a second. Putting up a bookshelf for them would require a day of DIY, and while he had no other plans this Saturday, he found the idea of doing DIY himself amusing, given how little he had ever actually produced with his hands. Never too late to change it, Norman. It's called do it yourself for a reason. You doing it. Norman decided that he would not be purchasing a second nightstand and felt a bit embarrassed just thinking about what someone might think if they saw he had two. Then he realized with relief that the chance of anyone ever seeing how many nightstands he had was very low. Damn, kinda caught feels near the end there. Norman, you need to get out there and get yourself some good, you know? Norman's loneliness does cause relief in this scenario, but you can't be lonely forever. I think Norman needs to shoot his shot with Lisa. Or learn to use the internet, like in this next story, where Norman looks for wild Asian ass. Norman was sat at his work desk, eating his plain cheddar cheese sandwich and doing the local paper's crossword puzzle. He was chuffed that he was doing so well. In fact, only one clue remained. Wild Asian ass. The clue read. He was really stumped, and he wanted to win because a completed crossword could be returned and entered into a drawing for a CSI box set. Suddenly, Norman had an idea. He could Google the clue to get the answer. He struggled with the morality of cheating before he decided to throw caution to the wind. W-I-L-D, Norman typed in the letters while frantically looking around the office lest he be caught cheating or doing something else. A-S-I... Wait! Onager! Norman remembered. The nature documentary with the narrator that had the soothing voice. He deleted his search and walked to the post box after work with his head held high. He told Norman all about it when he got home. A few days later, after the competition had ended, Norman rushed to the door to check the post. And there it was, his entry, with a return to sender written on it. In his haste, Norman had forgotten the stamp. Well, you win some, you lose some there, don't you, Norman? I think in this story you dodged a bigger bullet than you realize. Norman is wished a Happy New Year. Norman packed up his suitcase and got up to leave the office for the day. As he passed Lisa on the way back out, Lisa smiled and said, "Happy New Year, Norman." Norman wished her a Happy New Year back, paused, and then said, "See you next year." As Norman walked out the door, he smiled. See, Norman got game. What a clever and amazing joke. Well, for Norman, at least. Norman has a date. Oh, he's getting into it. Look at him go. Norman was at the grocery store one evening after work at his usual time when he was startled to see a table set up near the lunch meats. There was not usually a table there, so Norman started to feel uncomfortable. However, the man behind the table was very friendly. He said hello to Norman and even called him sir. Norman was not used to being called sir, so he was very flattered. But he was not sure if he should call the man sir back, so he just nodded. "Would you like to try one of these?" said the man, holding out a strange brown piece of food. Norman did not want to try the new food, but he didn't know what else to do, so he accepted it. It was very sticky. "It's a date," the man said. Norman said thank you and walked away to nibble on the date. It was very strange and sweet, not like a biscuit at all. Norman put the date in the bakery trash can, well out of sight of the man at the table. Usually, he uses the deli trash can at the grocery store. What a strange evening it has been. Yeah, you got a date with a strange man. Nobody tell Norman that wasps have to die in order for dates to be created? Oh no, wait, that's figs. Never mind. You're good, Norman. Just enjoy your date with the nice man from the deli. Norman takes the day off. Oh, you're lucky. You're so lucky. At 7 a.m., the clock in Norman's room goes off. Norman's not too disturbed by this because he's been awake since 6:57 a.m. But as he lifts his head from the pillow, he feels something throbbing in his temple. His nose is also stuffy. Oh no, you caught it too, didn't you, Norman? There's been a cold going around the office. Better check my temperature. Norman lets out a small cough as he checks his thermometer. 99 degrees. Not good. He sits on the foot of his bed and thinks. He took a sick day 8 months ago. Would it look bad to take another one so soon? Then again, would his coworkers be annoyed by his periodic nose blowing? Norman decides that he should go in. You never know when you need that sick day for something serious. As Norman walks through his living room, he sees Norman sleeping on the ground. Norman looks up at him tiredly. Meow. A small pile of vomit is in the corner. Norman calls his boss and lets him know that he's not coming in today because Norman needs to go to the vet. Oh, I love that. He loves his little animal more than he loves himself. Oh, little feline creature, little do you know that you are my reason to live. Kind of weird and sad, but also kind of sweet. I don't really know how I feel. Norman makes spaghetti. Ooh, spaghetti. It was snowing, and Norman really wanted to make spaghetti. Just seconds after lighting his stove, under 2 ounces of generic store-brand noodles, he realized that he didn't have spaghetti sauce. Norman's heart sank. Not only would he not get spaghetti, the noodles would have to go to waste. As he was about to toss the spaghetti, a whim of a thought crossed his mind. He grabbed a can of diced tomatoes, some olive oil, basic kitchen spices. Well, it didn't taste like the spaghetti that he was used to, and in some ways it was even better. It looked like the fancy spaghetti that he sometimes sees in the magazines. Norman enjoyed the feeling of accomplishment and creativity, though he told himself that next time he would not forget to pick up spaghetti sauce. Look at Norman, expanding his horizons, doing something new. Even if you just did it the one time, at least now you know that you can do it, you know? I think that's the thing I like the most about Norman's stories. How about this one? Norman checks his email. Norman logged on to his Yahoo email, only to be greeted by a very official-looking message. The terms and conditions have been revised and updated. Before continuing to use our website, please read them carefully and then select I agree at the bottom. Norman put on his reading glasses, settled into his seat, and began to read. Much time later, when Norman reached the end, he felt that the terms and conditions were very reasonable. Satisfied, he clicked, I agree. Norman smiled at Norman, who'd been curled up next to him. Well, Norman, today was certainly productive. Even if Norman did spot something untoward in the terms and conditions, I don't think that he would contact anyone about it. Maybe he would just click, I don't agree, and lose access to his Yahoo email. Is that all he does, is check his email? He doesn't know how to use the internet still? That's fine, Norman. Most of the internet's not worth using anyways. Except specifically the ReddX YouTube channel. Thanks so much for watching this far with me, friends. Maybe click subscribe if you haven't yet. Our next story is Norman makes a mistake. Norman was incredibly tired today. A man holding a clipboard said to Norman, "That's a real nice tie you're wearing." "You too," Norman replied while walking away, before realizing that the man wasn't wearing a tie. It's just the auto response. Like, sure, you feel embarrassed because you said it, but the other person understands. They've done that before too. It's all about that human connection. Norman buys gas. Norman got in his car to drive home from work. After putting on his seatbelt and turning the key in the ignition, he checked the gas level, as he always did. Norman noticed that the gas indicator showed slightly less than a third of a full tank. I should get gas on the way home, thought Norman. He considered what gas station he should visit, and looked across the street to check the price at the station there. The station there has gas for $2.06, but I believe I remember the station near my home has gas for $2.04. I'll stop there instead. Bro, these gas prices from a decade ago are blowing my mind right now. So Norman pulled out of the parking lot and began his commute home. This way the gas level will be lower when I fill it up and I'll get an even better deal, he thought. Norman smiled at his situation. When Norman got to the gas station near his home, he noticed that the price was $2.09 per gallon. Norman scolded himself for incorrectly remembering the price of gasoline at this station. Nonetheless, my car is low on gas. I'll just fill it up here, Norman thought. Again, sometimes you win some, sometimes you lose some. When I worked at a gas station, we would have to go out and change the prices in the middle of the day, so maybe Norman was correct about the 204. And next time he goes to the 206 gas station, it's going to be 211. All right, that's a lot of numbers. I'm not making sense no more. Let's just do a couple more stories, then I'll get out of here for the day. God, I really love Norman. Norman answers the door. It was just after work, and Norman was assembling a meal in the kitchen. Just as he peeled back the plastic from his any-day roast, the doorbell rang. He quickly stirred his food before approaching the door and peeping through the peephole. "Hello?" he suggested. The man on the other side was smartly dressed and carrying a clipboard. Is that Mr. Norman? Speaking. Norman had joined Norman at the door. Norman lifted him up so that he could see through the peephole as well. That's adorable. We have a record that indicates that you recently signed up to our deluxe life insurance policy. I would like to talk to you about our super deluxe life insurance policy. Norman did not recall having signed up to a life insurance policy, and neither had Norman. I'm afraid you might have the wrong Norman, Norman shouted politely through the keyhole. May I come in for a moment? Asked Clipboard. No, I don't think so, Norman replied. This is an opportunity for you to leave a loved one assurance and comfort. You would want that, wouldn't you, Norman? Norman looked down at Norman. I think he's probably quite capable of looking after himself. I really must be getting on. I'm sorry. I hope you find another Norman. Norman felt very guilty as he silently watched Clipboard walk to the door opposite his and start feeling up his neighbor's mail. Yeah, don't feel sorry for that guy. Norman returned to his any-day roast, traded up, and visited his sofa. He looked at Norman, who was still sitting at the door. You will be able to look after yourself, won't you? Norman stretched and walked away. God, just a whole melange of emotions in this one. You find out the dude's a scammer, you're like, is Norman about to be axe murdered? And you feel real scared. But then Norman points out that the cat is really the only one that he has to look after anymore. And you feel real sad. What happened to Norman's son? This series of events should not have gone this way. But sometimes it is what it is. How about this one? Norman gets lit! I like that. Norman walked upstairs for the company party that was being held in the conference room. Normally, Norman did not go to these things, but he had a special blue tie that he was really wanting to show off to everyone. So after arriving in the conference room, he quickly moved over to the refreshments table and poured himself a glass of lemonade. Norman sipped on the lemonade. He thought it tasted a little peculiar, but he didn't want to throw it away and appear rude. After finishing the glass, Norman found himself bobbing his head a little to the music that was playing, and he really enjoyed it. Enjoying the lemonade, Norman? Lisa asked. She must have noticed that Norman was acting a little out of character. For some reason, Norman was brutally honest about his feeling on the lemonade. It's okay. Not really my thing, Norman said at a slightly elevated tone over the music. Yeah, I never really pegged you as a drinker, Lisa said, smiling. Norman gulped. He had drank alcohol, and now he was making a fool of himself in front of his coworkers. I've got a bit of work to catch up on, Norman said, leaving the conference room to go down to his cubicle and work the guilt away. Dude, that's the worst thing ever. I like your tie, by the way, Lisa called out. Norman smiled. I do too, Norman said, smiling before leaving the party. Well, I guess I'm happy if Norman's happy. I don't think you should be working in a cubicle off hours. I know they're not paying you for that. But somehow I'm sure Norman would tell me that hard work is its own reward. He's kind of like Hank Hill in a way. Maybe that's why I like him so much. Norman plays video games. After a long day at the office and a warm bowl of Quaker Oats, Norman boots up his IBM. Most days, Norman reads his emails and then goes to watch CSI, but today was different. Being adventurous, Norman loads up a video game. It was a game of kings and queens, of knights and guilds. Norman was instantly mesmerized by the vast variety and beauty of the game. Hours and hours of just clicking away. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9. After hours and hours of being completely immersed, Norman finally glances at the clock and did a double take in disbelief. 10 o'clock? 30 minutes past his bedtime? Shocked and dumbfounded, Norman quickly shuts down his laptop and goes to bed. Groggy and tired, Norman thinks to himself in his bed, maybe solitaire just isn't for me. Kings and queens, knights and guilds, got it? Super clever. I love all of the Norman stories, honestly. We're still working our way through the top posts of all time. I ain't seen anybody else doing it, so I figured, why not me? It doesn't have the mass appeal of some other things, but sometimes that's okay. We just need to kick back and relax a little bit, so thank you for doing exactly that with me, friends. I hope you'll click all the buttons. The Life of Norman stories aren't chronological, but if you haven't seen the 3 other episodes, maybe click through on the playlist on the end card. Thanks so much. Always remember, friends, that you're loved, you're worthy, you definitely deserve it, and I shall see you in the next one. So until then, bye-bye. Go ahead and cut them open. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. Promise, swears he